Hi folks, Bill Steele here with 3DChameleon, and today in this video we're going to walk through how to set up Ultimaker's Cura for use with the 3DChameleon Mk2. Now, I literally just installed the latest version of 4.8. We haven't done any configuration changes or anything. When you set up Cura, it requires that you set up one printer, so I went ahead and chose just the default Ender 3 profile from their add printers dialog box. I'm not even going to use this. Once I go ahead and update it, I'll go ahead and delete this one because I won't be needing it anymore. It's just to get it to up and running. So to start off with, the first thing that we're going to do is we're just going to go to our installation video. This is the Start Here video. And in the description of the video, if you expand that out, you'll see the Ender 3 Cura sample profile. We're just going to go ahead and click on that link. And we will download that file. So there you can see when it comes up with these 4 squares there, that's the file we're looking for. We'll just hit download on that. And we'll go ahead and open that file up. That's going to be in our downloads. And it's going to be our most recent download. Sorry, wrong downloads folder. There it is. And when I open this up, I want to make sure I open it as a project, not import the models. When I open it as a project, it's going to go ahead and bring in my custom printer configurations. So this is important here. This is the file that we need to actually set up everything for our 3DChameleon. Now, the 3DChameleon on my Ender 3 is installed in the basic configuration. There's nothing done other than, it's mounted to the top using the supplied mount, and it's plugged into the stock extruder using the extruder ptfe adapter that we have available on Thingiverse. On Thingiverse, you can search for 3DChameleon, all one word, and Ender, and you will find that adapter. So you print that adapter out, and in our kit we include some ptfe tube as well as the ptfe couplers that you'll need. And you'll just take the stock extruder off your machine, you'll put this adapter in its place, and you'll remount the stock extruder, and that's all you need to do with that. In this case, the switch can be mounted on the front or on the side of the x-axis, front of the y-axis or on the side of the x. This code is set up for the side of the x, which is the easiest installation method. On the Ender 3 V2, you can actually set the switch on the front of the y-axis a lot easier than you can on the V1 machines. But this software configuration, you'll see as we go through here, it's very easy and allows you to work with either one. So I've just opened up my profile. I'm just going to go ahead and hit slice here just to make sure that we have everything good and working as a start. We'll hit the preview and we should see our sliced files, and we do. In this particular case, we don't see the quad color, the what do you call this, the purge tower, simply because we don't have our printer selected. So let's go ahead and change our configuration and select the right printer. So I'm going to go to machine settings, and you can see here in machine settings we have 4 extruders with the 3DChameleon. We have our each extruder has start and end G-code. Now this is a bug that's for some reason been going on for years in Cura. It doesn't show the code until you click in the window, and as you click in the window it will appear. So I'm just going to go ahead and show you that all 4 of those are there. Now all of these are very similar. Each extruder has the same start and end G-code. The only difference is that the in order for the 3DChameleon to switch colors, you press a button one time for extruder 1, you press it twice for extruder 2, and 3, 4 times likewise. So that's the only difference between them. They all pretty much do everything else identically other than that one feature. So the first thing that we're going to look at is the initial location of the button. And if you look at this code, it actually there's a lot more comments inside of here. Their editor doesn't let you really scroll very easily. but you can see that this is the initial button location minus 3 millimeters. So what that means is, in this particular case on my machine, the x-axis is at 222.5 millimeters. That's where the button is located. And you subtract 3 millimeters and plug that value into here. The installation video, we talk about how you determine the location of your button. Basically, you turn your printer on, you home it, and you use the LCD move axis controls to move the axis till you actually engage the button. If your machine stops before you reach the button, then you just need to move your button back closer to the axis so that at the very end of its travel, it can hit it. Now you'll notice in this particular case, this printer is set up for 220 millimeters, and I have my switch triggering at 219.5 plus 3, so it's 222.5. It turns out that the firmware that's on a lot of these Creality Ender 3 machines varies. So you might be limited to 220, you might be limited to 225, or as in my case, it's actually limited to 230. But I have the switch in a nice location at 222.5. So you can position that anywhere you want to. The y-axis in my particular case, I just simply have it pointing to the middle of the build plate. So it's just moving the nozzle to the middle and then moving the X all the way to the side of it. You can place that wherever you want to. I just happen to like that because that's going to be very close to where the purge tower is anyway. We're going to do this in all 8 locations. So you have this at the starting location and the starting location of the end extruder G-code for all of the extruders. The other portion that you're going to edit is you can actually ignore the timing because it should be good where it's at. But you'll see here that we have a bunch of E100 statements, and these are actually loading and unloading. You'll see the same thing over here for unloading. This is when we're unloading the extruder, we're backing it out of the extruder. When we're loading it into the extruder. Now in my particular printer, I've measured that, and you measure that basically by putting a piece of filament into the printer all the way to the hot end. In fact, you would extrude a little bit, and then remove the filament. And what we're looking for is the distance between the end of the nozzle, where the tip of the filament comes out, and the point at which your drive gears grab a hold of your filament. So that distance is going to be determined. You can actually just use a piece of filament to determine that distance. You can cut it off, or you can mark it, or whatever you want to. You can just determine where that filament is grabbed by the drive gears and measure that from that point all the way through to the nozzle. You remove that filament and use a ruler or use a tape measure or something to measure that distance. I just did this on my Ender 3 and determined that the distance is 350 millimeters. So I'm going to change my code here. I'm sorry, I said 350. It's 330 millimeters. So I'm going to change my code to match that. Now what we see here is a bunch of E100 statements and an E25. So these all added together total, and you can see here, it's let's start at the top here. So 100, 200, 300, 400, 500, 600, 25. So what we're going to do is we're going to change mine to 330, but I'm going to add a little bit. I'm going to make this 360. So we're going to delete 3 of these 100s because we had 600 before. So we're deleting 3 of them. So now our loading, actually, we're going to make this 330. This should be 330, Bill. So we're loading 330 millimeters of filament. That's going to take it from the extruder and push it into the nozzle. And we're going to unload 330 plus 30. And we're going to unload the extra amount just to make sure we pull enough out of the extruder that we push it out of the extruder drive gears. So we deleted 3 of those. So there we have 1, 2, 3. And in this case, I have it at 50. I'm just going to go ahead and bump that up to 60 just to be safe. The idea here is that we load it 330. If we unloaded 330, the drive gears might still have it. But if we push it an extra inch or so, you know, that's actually going to get us out of that distance. So there we go. There's our load and unload. Now I'm going to go ahead and copy this block, and I'm going to go and paste that into the other extruders as well. So we're just going to replace that one. And I could just as easily just edit these, right? So there's 3, and I could go down here and change this to a 30. Same thing. So again, we're going to take out 3. Now you'll notice I'm taking out 2 lines at a time when I'm doing this. I'm taking out the G92E0. This resets the distance that the extruder can move back to 0, and then we're moving it 100 millimeters. The reason why we're resetting these is some versions of Marlin have a limitation on how far you can move in the extruder, and so in our case we're just breaking it up. Now on some machines without that limitation, you could just do one and put all 330 millimeters of travel on one line, and then what you would do is you would delete the rest of these. So, but in the particular firmware that's on my ender, we're limited by the firmware to 100 millimeters maximum of the extruder motor traveling. So the next thing we'll do is we'll do the same thing over here for the end G-code for each one. So that one, oops. We'll do the same thing here. And we're going to walk through what each line of this code does in a second here. Clean up some of my mess here. Good. Just removing some of the extra space that's not needed there. Okay, good. So that's it. That's the only changes that are required for this machine to work. When I go ahead and close this out, if I go back to prepare, we don't have a purge block, so let's go ahead and let's set that one up here. So if we scroll down into our code or into our options, you'll see that there is some multi-material support. They call it dual extruder. And so I have the prime tower enabled. I'm not real sure why I didn't turn on there. And we have the prime tower minimum volume of 30 millimeters. And this is the location, 130 by 180. So it's placing it, roughly in the back here. The reason why we do that is, remember, in our tool change G-code, the first thing that we do is we move to our holding location. Well, it turns out our holding location is right back here in the back of the build plate. When we move to that location, it'll load the filament, and then when it wants to resume, it'll actually come back over here and resume. And actually, now that I say that, I've made a mistake. I'm going to move this over to the side here because in reality, what we have is the switch is over on the side over here. So it's actually on the side, and that's what we're moving. So, because it's on the x-axis, remember. So let me move this a little bit further over. So 200. That's a little bit bigger. 50. Nope, 110 right in the middle. There we go. Good. So if I slice that, and go to our preview, there you can see we have our purge. Now, for some reason, they don't colorize it all the way through. Once we do this, actually, we lost our lines. This appears to be a new bug. This is we saw the tool, we saw the G-code there earlier. I'm not entirely sure. There we go. You can see it's actually doing the purge, but it's not rendering the purge for some reason. Maybe this is a setting that I don't have turned on. This is like I said, this is brand new 4.8. But there you can see the purge. There you can see our objects, all 4 different colors. So we're good there. Now, what if I didn't want all 4 colors? Maybe I wanted 2 of them, 2 color and 2 in the other color. So we can actually go back here. I'll show you how easy that is to change this. So maybe this is the one I want blue. You can see I can just right mouse click on that and choose whichever one I want. So now which one is blue? Well, that's number 3. So if I change it to 3, that'll change that to blue. And we can make this one white. That's number 2. There you go. And so you can see I have these colorized. Now you can also go through and redefine these and change their colors to match whatever your machine happens to be. So to do that, you can go to Configure Cura, you can go to Materials, and in the materials, you'll see the 4 that we've defined as generic PLA. You can simply take another option and duplicate it, and then make those changes to it, which is what we did to match your machine settings. If you wanted to change the color, you simply double-click on this little color block here and pick the new color that you want. So there's our purple that we've just picked, and you'll see that when we do that, it changes to purple. You can do that for any of the materials. If you want to use PETG, you can simply copy this and give it a new name. So we'll go ahead and keep those changes. We'll give it our new name, PETG number 1, and pick the color that you want. Set your diameter and things like that, and set your print temperatures. So 215 for PETG is a little low. We might make this 245. And the standby temperature, this is something else you want to be careful of. For some reason, they lower the temperature. In the 3DChameleon, because we're all sharing the one hot end, you do not want to lower that. If you lower that, what it'll do is as it's changing colors, it'll turn off the heater and lower it, and cause you to have to wait to warm it back up once it reloads. So we'll just go ahead and do that, and now you can pick that filament if you wanted to do that. The other thing that you can do is you can go to your extruders over here, and you can actually pick the material out that you want. And those there you can see it actually it's changed that one to 245. So I don't really want that one. Let's go back. Oops. Close. Actually, I believe that's a bug because I did not pick that material. Interesting. So like I said, this literally is the very first time I've used this version of Cura. We're going to set that to 210. Make sure all these others are 210, and they are. Reslice that. And preview, and there you go. So there's our file. Now we can just simply take that and print it to the printer. So what is special about this profile other than it has 4 colors? Really the only change that we made is if you go into the machine settings, we've added the extruder start and extruder and GCode. So let's go ahead and start up Notepad++ here, and let's copy this one, paste that into Notepad, and we'll do another new document. We'll copy this one, paste it in a Notepad, and let's walk through what each one does. So in both cases, the very first line is a M117, which basically is, hey, display something on the LCD. And the text that we're displaying is either loading or unloading of the LCD, of the current color. So T0 is extruder 1, if you will. There are 4 extruders, 1, 2, 3, 4. And in GCode, they always call them T, so starting at index of 0. So T0, T1, T2, and T3. The next thing that we're doing is we are telling our GCode to move into absolute mode. What that means is that you are commanding the printer to move its build plate or hot end via the G0 and G1 commands to a particular location. And that is, we're starting off with the absolute mode. We then tell it to move to our holding location. This is where our button is. In this case, it's on the end of the x-axis, obviously -3 millimeters. We then switch it back to relative mode. And the reason why we do this is we want to make sure we go exactly where we're thinking about going. We don't want to go to a point that's not close to where we're at, or so we basically have to explicitly tell it, hey, you know where home 00 is, go to this position exactly, and that's what this command does. We then turn it off and we go back into relative mode. And the reason why we're going to relative mode is because we've locked this position, and now every move that we do from this point forward is relative to that position. So you'll see that the first thing that we do when we're loading a tool is we want to get back to extruder number 0, or T0. And in fact, this one is loading T0. So to do that, we're going to press a button. And in this case, to press the button, it's moved to this 219.5 position. It's then going to move, regardless of whether you've put the button on the X or the Y, it's going to move both of them 3 millimeters. So 3 millimeters in addition to this. So it's adding on, it's relative. We're moving 3 millimeters to engage the button. We're waiting while we're pressing the button for 1.3 seconds. And then we move back off of the button. So this basically moves to the button 3 millimeters, waits, and then moves back off of the button 3 millimeters. And then it waits for 3 seconds for this event to occur. So basically it's going to rehome the 3DChameleon. And you will hear the 3DChameleon rewind and hit its end stop inside. Once we've done that, we're then going to go ahead and press a button for, in this case, 5.5 seconds. So what this is doing, this 5.5 second command is the one that actually tells it to move the 3DChameleon's filament forward. If we did it for 3.3 seconds, it would move it backwards. Now remember, that's only, I shouldn't say forward and backwards. I should say that this is a counterclockwise rotation of the motor that moves the filament. And then a 3.3 is actually a counterclockwise rotation. So because of that, we have tool 0 and tool 1 running the counterclockwise and then clockwise direction for loading and unloading, but we have tools 2 and 3 the opposite of that, because they're on the back side of that motor. So that right there commands it to press the button for 5.5 seconds. We then let off the button, and then we go back and we press it again. And here's the interesting thing. We're pressing it the second time because this command tells it to turn in a counterclockwise direction, but only on the next button press and for as long as you hold the next button press. So that's what this one does. This one presses the button, and then G4, wait. This is a wait command. It tells the machine to wait for 10 seconds. So you've pressed the button, hold it for 10 seconds, and then hold it for another half second, and then go ahead and start the extruder up and move the extruder for 50 millimeters. What this is doing is it's moving the filament. Basically, this speed that we picked for this, it's 10 seconds, is 1 second per inch, or 1 second per 25 millimeters. It's loading the filament. And then right at about the time that this half second occurs, we go ahead and turn on the extruder and load it for 50 millimeters. This should take the filament from before the green Y adapter. It should push it all the way through the green Y adapter and into the extruder, and then load it 2 inches or 50 millimeters into the extruder. Once we've loaded it into the extruder, we then need to tell the 3DChameleon, okay, stop running the motor, which is let off the button, reset your extruder position. Now let's just press the button for a quarter second. Okay, in this case, 400 milliseconds. We just need it to be above a quarter of a second, and 400 milliseconds is a good time here. The idea here is that now that we've loaded the filament, we need the 3DChameleon to let go of the filament. It no longer needs to grab a hold of it. So this button press commands the 3DChameleon to move to one of the other colors. Just move to the next color. It doesn't make a difference which one it is. Just let go of the current color. And that's what we've done here. So we move off of that current color, wait one more second for that to occur. And once that's done, we can now move back into our absolute positioning mode of everything. We can go ahead and tell the extruder, go ahead and stay in relative mode. And if we turn the fan off, go ahead and turn it back on. And then lastly, go ahead and reload the filament. This is the lines that I edited earlier. We're loading 330 millimeters. And that will take it from the point where this 50 millimeter load occurred here, which is just above your extruder, and load it all the way to the hot end. Now, if you find that that this value is not large enough, by actually watching the filament reload, when it reloads, if it creates a blob before it does anything else, that means this E30 value is too large. If, however, it doesn't reload far enough, you'll start to see it doing its purging. The purging is actually going to occur a little later, and if that's the case, that means that this value is too big. You need to, I'm sorry, it's too small. You need to tell it to load a little bit further, right? So you'll increase this value. So decrease it if you're creating a blob, or increase it if you're not loading far enough into it. You want this filament to load just at the very tip, and you can tune it to exactly that. And that's the end of the unloading, or the loading. Unloading is basically the reverse of it. So what we're doing is we're going to that same button press location, only in this case we have this special block here that we call the tip shaping block. And what it's going to do is it's going to bounce the in and out the filament in the tip of the nozzle and into the ptfe tube to allow it to slowly cool in the proper shape. Once that's done, we then go ahead and rewind it. We pull the filament out of the hot end all the way back into the extruder, and actually have the extruder kind of push it out the other end. So it's basically if your printer ejects its own filament. That's what we're doing here. And that's the reason why we added the extra 30 millimeters to this line here. We want to make sure that we've pushed it far enough and then some to make sure that it's completely cleared the extruder. We then press the button 3 times. Now this is an interesting little trick here. Because we don't know what the previous extruder is, but we do know that in the load code, when we loaded it, we then just pressed it 1 time. If you press the button on the 3DChameleon 4 times, it'll always take you back to the color you were just at. So by pressing it 1 time, we've moved to whatever the next color is. In this case, it would be T1. And by pressing it 3 more times, we're at T1 here, goes to T2, T3, and back to T0. Okay, so it cycles back around. And the idea here is that by doing this, the same code on every color change will always take you back to the extruder that you just loaded. So we know exactly how to get to and from it simply by pressing 3 times. So that's all this block does, is it presses the button 3 times very quickly. And then lastly, we go ahead and press our button for 3 seconds. And I seem to have cut off some of my code here. Oh no, I'm sorry, this is unloading. This is good. So we've pressed it for 3.5 seconds. Okay, and what this is going to do is this is going to turn the motor backwards to unload the filament. Now remember, previously we loaded the filament, but now we're unloading the filament, which is why this is at the end. We press it for that amount of time. That's actually this whole block here. And we hold it for 10 seconds. So we're unloading the filament from the Y adapter. We're pulling it, it's just below the extruder right now, above the Y adapter. For 10 seconds, we're going to back it out. So basically, this is 10 inches if you think about it. It's basically 1 inch per second that you're retracting it, or 25 millimeters per second. So we're retracting this 250 millimeters. And then once we've got it, that 10-second delay, we then let off the button. And that's really the end of the color change. There is no other functionality needed. So we have 3 phases. We have the move the head to where the button is. The second phase is, in this case, either loading or unloading the filament. Both of those blocks look the same, except they're just in reverse. So, and then the third phase is moving the filament with the chameleon, and that's a 5.5 second pulse, or the in this case here, or the 3.5 second pulse here. And you'll notice that these are in reverse order, right? We're always going to move the button to that button press location at the beginning, but we're going to remove the filament from the hot end. We're going to remove it from the extruder, and then finally we're going to remove it from the green Y adapter. And then we're going to reverse that over here. Move to the button location. We're going to load it from the, it's before the green Y adapter. We're going to load it into the extruder. We're going to load it through the extruder, and then finally we're going to load it all the way into the hot end. So the 3 phases, they're all 3 represented with loading and unloading using this code. And like I said, extruder 2 is identical to that, extruder 3 is identical to that, and extruder 4 is identical to that. The only difference between any of them is where we're loading it. In extruder 1, we only press the extruder 1 time to load, to get back to extruder 1. In extruder 2, we press it that 1 time plus a second time. That moves it to the second extruder. The same thing here. Press it 1 time to get to the first extruder, a second time to get to the second, and a third time to get to the third extruder. And of course, lastly, the same thing here. The fourth, we'll have 4 of them. So 1, 2, 3, 4 presses. That's the only difference between any of these other than the labels that we're showing. So that's it. Real quick overview of the 3DChameleon's tool change G-code for the latest version of Cura. So all you have to do now is save this to your removable drive and load it onto your printer and hit print. By the way, when you import the profile, like I showed when you load this at the beginning, it's going to create a new printer for you. So I have it Creality Ender 3 with 3DChameleon. We also happen to have one for the Ender 5, which is the same thing. The Ender 5, the only difference between them is the length of the filament that you're loading and unloading. Everything else is identical. Now, the one thing to note on these is that, actually I can show it to you over here. Pretty much this code right here is the only code that's going to be special for your printer, as well as the button location. If you're using a direct drive, say like a Prusa Mark III, 100% of the rest of this code is going to be fine. In fact, you might only need one of these lines on a direct drive machine. You would eliminate the rest of these because you're not moving the filament that far. And that's going to be the same thing over here. You're going to eliminate these as well. You might only have one of them as well. And then the only other thing is the location of where you've placed your button. You know, wherever you mount your button, that's what you're going to put this first line as. And that's it. It's you don't have to mess with any of these other lines. It says you can do, increase or decrease these. But if you're using our stock system, you do not need to mess with these because that distances are already predefined in there. It's only if you're cutting the ptfe tubes do you need to actually alter these. And when I say that, these times for loading and unloading, 10 seconds should work on pretty much any machine, unless you've cut the distance between the Y adapter and the extruder down to, a very small value. You can make them shorter, but again, you do not have to make them shorter. You can leave them alone. So the only things that you must edit are this cumulative distance that you're moving the extruder and the button location. And you'll do that for all of them. So hopefully that gives you a good overview of what changes are needed for running this profile on Cura. And in this particular case, the Creality Ender 3, but this profile should work on pretty much any machine. If you wanted to, you could take this and rename this and change its properties to match whatever your printer is. Maybe it's a Ender 3 Pro or Max or whatever. You can just go in and edit the machine settings here, match your profile, and you should be good to go. As always, feel free to send me an email at bill@3dchameleon. And if you have any questions, fire off an email. I'll get back to you. Thanks for watching.